So got my camera back. I've actually had it back a week or two now, but I've been sort of debating with myself whether I should actually make this or not. I figure I'm probably going to inadvertently say something in one of my videos, so it's best to just, get it out now, just in case. So today's going to be a little bit of a serious one, and I'm going to tell you about Bubbles, and it's not my fish. Bubbles is actually my stoma, and I have a stoma because I have an ileostomy. I've had my ileostomy about 6.5 years because I have Crohn's. If anybody doesn't know what an ileostomy is, I had Crohn's, which was an inflammatory bowel disease, for about 10 years before I had my ileostomy. And it kind of got to a point where I was really, really ill. Like, I nearly died. I was that ill. They said that this was the last option. They tried all medications, all combinations. We'd even got some herbal things over from America, but nothing had worked. So they took me in surgery. They cut from my belly button down and took out all of my large intestine and a little bit of my small as well, because this was mainly where the Crohn's was. They then took the end of my small intestine, the ileum, and cut a small hole in my stomach wall and fed it through, and then sewed up the skin around that. So I have maybe ½ an inch of my small intestine coming through my stomach wall, and I put a bag on that, and everything I eat goes into the bag. I empty that when I need to, change every couple of days. That's ileostomy pretty much summed up. It seems kind of weird when I look back on it, because I mean, I was only 12 when I had it done. I'm 19 now, so I've kind of grown up with it, and even missed out on a lot of things because of how ill I was before. I missed out on a lot of school, It was quite difficult for my friends, I imagine, because I'd be off for weeks or months at a time, whether I was at home or I was in hospital. The year I had my ileostomy was supposed to be the year I started high school. When you're about 11, you start high school, and you have your 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So you end up being about 16 by the time you're in year 11, at which point you leave and either go into a job or you go to college, which is for 2 years, and that's where you get your A-levels, and then you go on to university. We have quite a few systems. But I didn't do the first year of my high school. I was too ill. I was in and out of hospital, and then in about April I went into hospital, and I was in there just over 3.5 months in all. Didn't leave. I got really ill, like I said before. They'd tried everything. I was on morphine, I'd been on ketamine, I was drugged up to my eyeballs, and I was still in pain, and I was just in a really awful place, basically. So they came to me and said, this is what we have to do now. So I was put on priority list, and I had my surgery a couple of days later. And it was kind of a bit of a guessing work, because even though there is a lot more people now with Crohn's, colitis, ileostomies, colostomies, urinostomies, whatever, there's a lot more people my age than there was, say, 20 years ago. But it's still not a very common thing. I think the average age for an ileostomy is about 65, and I had one when I was 12. And my medical team hadn't really come across a situation like this before, where somebody so young was having to have one. Or should I say, somebody of that age. It can be fairly common in newborn babies who might have a twist in their intestine, but they get it reversed within a couple of weeks. So a kid, a pre-teen if you will, having one was kind of strange and not heard of a lot. So I had a lot of people on my medical team, and a lot of people working on me to make sure it all went okay, which, it kind of did. I was in hospital for a while after. I was in intensive care for a couple of days, and I was just flat out with my immune system, so I picked up a couple of infections. and I worked my arse off to be getting around myself again. One thing you should know about me is I'm a very stubborn person, and if I want something, I'll go for it. So I didn't really want to be taking another year off school. I didn't want to have to resit. So about a month after my surgery day, I was back in school, which was a whole new thing again, because even though my life hadn't really changed drastically, it was all these little things that make it feel drastic. Suddenly I was having to be careful of the way I dressed and what I ate, and I was so conscious of my bag all the time. I mean, now I can go hours without thinking about it. It just is. But at first, when you're barely 13 and you're going into a new school, or a school where everybody's already been for a year, where you're still getting lost, where you don't really know people, it was massive, it was huge, and it was scary. And actually, my best friend at the time, I kind of decided that I wasn't going to fit in her friendship group. Thankfully, I did have another group of friends, and they kind of took me under the wing, if you will. And school was actually amazing. I think it could have gone so badly, but it didn't. I met some amazing people, and the school was fantastic with me. I had lift keys, I had toilet keys made up, I could carry around with me. I had a pass that allowed me to get out of classes a bit early, so nobody would ever bump into me or hurt me by accident. I also met some amazing people. And my best friend right now has actually been my best friend since I met him my second year. And he was actually the first person ever, really, apart from teachers, that I'd actually told about my bag from people not knowing me beforehand. I mean, the people I'd been friends with through primary school, they knew that I had an illness, and they knew that I'd be off and all this kind of stuff, so they knew what was going on with me. And I was so scared telling him. I thought, how are people going to react to this? And I'm pretty sure his first words were something like "cool scar," and it was such a massive weight off my shoulders that people weren't going to be, idiots about this. Now, don't get me wrong, I've come across negative reactions, of course I have. And I always had this idea that it'd be better for people to hear off me than to hear through the grapevine, if you will. So my year 8 science class, we happened to be doing about the digestive tract, and I walked up to the front of my class and I did talk about it, and I showed everybody my bag. And everybody was really quite taken back, because if you don't know what you're looking for, it's kind of hard to know if someone's got a bag or not. So from then, I spent maybe the next 18 months or so with people coming up to me and asking me questions and asking me about my illness and my bag and how I dealt with it and all these kind of things, which I was more than happy to tell them, because that way they knew the actual facts instead of talking amongst themselves and just coming up with things. I've actually had 3 surgeries now. My first one was when I originally got my ileostomy. My second one was about 6 months later, because they hadn't really known how loose or tight to do things, and I ended up getting a hernia, so it all had to be redone. And my third one I had a couple months ago, about the beginning of July, and that was to make my ileostomy permanent. Now this one was my decision, and it was the first one that was my decision, because the operations I've had before, I was under 16, which means even though it's my body, it was my parents who had to consent. And as soon as I left high school, I started putting plans in motion to get this surgery done. And it went really well. I was kind of expecting the worst, so I was pleasantly surprised when I was only in hospital for a couple of days. And I pretty much signed myself out at the end of it because it was driving me insane. By day 2 I was up and walking about. There is a slightly depressing saying for people with ileostomies or colostomies. urinostomies, whichever, and it's a bag or a box, because it's a last resort option. At the end of the day, it saved my life, and that's as simple as it gets. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to say today. Just wanted to tell you about that, and if you've got any comments or any questions, then leave them below and I'll get back to you. Okay, bye.